Bryce, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
What's up, Mike? How's it going?
Dude, fired up for this. Been a long time coming. We've been connected for a while.
Yeah.
I've interviewed at least one of your business partners and
Yep.
many of your colleagues. So it's only a matter of time. But dude, give us the spark notes. You were sharing a little bit before we press record. So I'm super fired up for this. I think you got a really unique story, but give us the spark notes. Who you are, where are you coming from? What are you doing now?
Cool. So yeah, my name is Bryce Felkner. I'm the Chief Sales Officer at Voltaic and one of the founders of the company. Quick Spark Notes version of my life. I have a little bit different of a background than what a lot of people have in our space. My parents were actually missionaries doing Bible translation in like the jungles of the world. So I was actually born in Peru, and like I didn't even wear shoes until I was about 10 years old. So like I was living a very wild childhood kind of life.
Yeah.
I tell my guys a lot I was living the Mowgli life. But then when I was about 10, we moved to the capital city and we were there for about a year or two. It was kind of where I began to pick up more Spanish and things like that. But then we moved to East Africa and I spent the rest of my kind of developing years in Nairobi, Kenya. And so, was big into sports, big into everything there, and, was very active in leadership and all kinds of stuff within my school. Came back to the United States in 2005 for college. And I got a degree in family and human services with a minor in psychology. So I was really on path to do a lot of social work, counseling, that kind of avenue. And after college, ended up getting a job where they took my degree in place of experience because I had none. And I was managing a floor of about 250 adults with mental disabilities. And it was their 9 to 5. So I was working with adults with severe disabilities and vocational trainers to help people kind of do a lot of production work and stuff like that. Fast forward, that was where I honed a lot of communication skills. Kind of the thing that I would say is probably one of my strongest skill sets in life is
Yeah.
communicating complicated concepts in really simple ways so that people can grasp them. Then I moved out to California with my then wife, and at the time we were, broke, didn't have anything. I was applying for any job that would take me, and I kind of fell into the door-to-door space for a company that was not at the time doing solar, but was doing something solar adjacent. And within a few months of being there, they did add solar as an offering. So I was a marketing manager, was running a team of door knockers, and just became really, really good at it and really successful really fast. And so kind of jumped over a lot of my peers and coworkers to take a management role and then a regional director role. And after a couple of years at that company, I was one of the top 3 ranking members in the company. And we built that company to be on the Inc. 500 list and all kinds of stuff. So like a really aggressive kind of growth and rise to success.
Yeah.
Long story short, things didn't pan out there. There was some dishonesty and some things that lack of integrity in business. And so we ended up pulling out and starting our own outfit in 2017 called Voltaic. And from there, it's just been, the roller coaster of entrepreneurship and building a business and sales,
Yeah.
seeing high growth and major losses and all kinds of stuff that goes into building a business. And, the most recent development is that we are now a vertically integrated installer as well, where we're doing both the sales side of the business, but also the installation side. And so 2023 is looking to be a rocket ship for us. And we're along for the ride and making sure that things are going as smooth as we possibly can. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Let's go. Okay. A lot of cool things to unpack. So let's start at the beginning.
Let's do it.
I hate the question of like, what was it like with this? Because for you, it was probably just normal. But talk to me about growing up, moving around from place to place, starting in the Mowgli life. I think that's hilarious. But like starting in the jungle, moving to some of these bigger cities. And then, I mean, I guess eventually we'll get to the transition to the US, but like, what talk to me about your experience growing up in your childhood.
I think that, one, I would say I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything. I think it equipped me for so many things in life. But, like one thing that has been lost a lot in the last couple of decades is the ability to have a really free childhood. And at the first 8 years of my life was very free and wild. And I was able to experience and test and, just sort of take the world sort of on my own terms. But like it was a very small knit community. It was a fairly safe missionary community in the jungle. And so there wasn't a lot of outward exposure. So as I aged, I happened to kind of transition at the right times, I feel like, because
Mhm.
getting to meet people around the age of 10 that weren't like me at all was really valuable. And I think that one thing I'm a huge advocate for to everybody who will listen is that people need to have true multicultural experiences in their life. And I don't mean like going on vacation to Mexico. I mean like getting to live with people of another culture that do things different than you, that think different than you, then see the world different than you, and
Yeah.
realize that not only is it okay for them to think differently, it's actually good. It's actually needed for you to have an additional perspective. So I would say I have a pretty global perspective on the way that I think about life. I've seen the type of poverty that people in the US will probably never experience in their life. I've seen it. I didn't experience it firsthand. My family was doing okay, but like the people that we met were. And I've also seen, incredible hospitality from people overseas to be able to just welcome you in, give the shirt off your back. And a lot of my perspective on people in the world is really framed from a multicultural or third culture experience. But I think the kind of weird part of it is that we used to have we used to call ourselves TCKs, which is third culture kids, meaning that you never really belong in the culture that you're from or the culture that you live in.
Yeah.
So, I was technically American, you know, by birth, by my parents, but I had never lived in the United States other than for short couple month stints. But I also was not Kenyan. I didn't, when I moved to Kenya, I was still a foreigner. I was still in the minority, and it was just a little different. And so, I think that the perspectives that I was able to gain from that were really valuable. But yeah, it was a beautiful childhood, and it was full of tons of adventure and tons of like, new experiences and things that I cherish to this day.
Yeah. That's so cool. Seeing that, um, I guess that generosity from people, these different cultures growing up, how do you think that framed your overall view on humanity?
Hmm. I think that's a great question. I would say that when you like a lot of people only assume that you can give out of abundance, right? Like
Yeah.
make a lot, especially in this type of environment, right? In sales, like make a lot of money and then find ways to give, out of your surplus as opposed to out of your requirements to live. And I
Yeah.
think that's an important perspective on generosity, an important perspective even in sales to say, like a lot of guys are trying to maximize everything that they can make on a job or whatever and in a business and just worry about the top line. But like in our business today, my business partners and I, like we are very people focused and we're very our people focused. We've made some
Yeah.
decisions that were not good for our business, that were good for our people.
Yeah.
And we will continue to do that because that's our point and our purpose in doing this and in being here. So I think that um I think that culture of I'll give the shirt off my back even if my last one left is a really cool perspective as a business owner to be able to instill in your company. So I would say that's something that
Yeah.
you know, really framed that for me.
Yeah. Dude, that's so powerful. I I'm gonna plant this question because I don't want to forget it. And I'm really curious to hear about the buy-in from all of your partners because I know there are a bunch of you guys that started this company together. But before we get there, just because I can't forget that question. Before we get there, the reason I ask this original question about how it framed your view is I think nowadays it's so common for people to villainize wealth. It's so common for people to have this assumption that those who have did it by having some sort of negative or selfish or like villainish, I don't know, like bad energy around creating it, right? Like literally yesterday, a couple kids, some of my really good buddies from like childhood were texting. One of them said like, just assume that anybody outside of like Mr. Beast that's that wealthy is just an asshole. And I'm like, thank goodness I don't have time to respond to this right now. But I think that's like no fault of their, like that's just what people think. So it's so cool to see that being plugged into a different culture, a different part of the world, that's completely flipped.
Mhm.
And I think it points a lot to what's happening here in the States and the cultures that people grew up in here.
I think that like I agree with you. I think, if I'm being completely honest, I villainized wealth for a long time, and not
Yeah.
even so much as that I thought everyone that had money was bad, but more so that I thought money itself was a bad pursuit, right? And that
Mhm.
the having money meant that you couldn't be XYZ or you couldn't do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Where money really does amplify who you are for sure. And
Yeah.
and you and I both know people in this space who are wildly generous with the things that they've built and done. And it's really cool to see, like what you can do. Like I might be able to go help a homeless person on the side of the street. Somebody else might be able to build a whole orphanage for somebody.
Yeah.
Now, like and those are both awesome things because they're coming out of desire to
Yeah.
give and desire to care for others, but one has a little bit more impact on more people, and I think that that's really ultimately what wealth is. And I heard somebody once say that money, if you take the word money and you just replace it with the word tools, you begin to have a different perspective on it, right? If you have a million tools, what can you build? You can build a business, you can build, a charity, you can do all these other kinds of things because
Yeah.
money itself is neutral. It's what you do with it and how you kind of approach that. So I think that even overseas, especially overseas, there's still a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, and people definitely, in some ways, villainize. They still have a sense of like, well, these people have because they're on the backs of other people, and sometimes that's really true. A lot
Yeah.
of people become very wealthy off of the backs of other people, but you don't have to do it that way.
Hmm.
And the perspective you have once you have, wealth or you have money, you have that ability is then what can I really do with it? And I would say I struggled a lot with generosity for a long time. And it was actually my ex-wife that was really helped open my eyes to a little bit of that because growing up as a missionary family, I was just always wanting to keep everything I had. I didn't even want to buy stuff with it. I just wanted to have, so I
Yeah.
felt safe. So I had some security with that. And learning to give that away and be more generous has been a fruitful pursuit. It's also been a challenging one for me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super, super interesting. And I think the relationship to money probably something we could talk about for hours, but like I know I've historically had tons of blocks that I had to work through and they radically throttled my growth. As clearly you've done a lot of work on this relationship, right? How did you begin to heal this? I'll use the word relationship, but also I'll also use the money mindset word. Like, how did you begin to heal this and get it to where it is now? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but my perspective is if we do not heal those things, we would never be able to achieve the level that we're currently at, and we
Yeah.
sure as hell won't get to the level that we will be at in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
How did you begin to heal it? What did that look like?
I think the first perspective was starting to be around other people that were like that. When you're around a lot of successful people, you start to see the good and the bad. You start to see the people who, like my first company that I was at, where we were working our fingers to the bone and we were broke, all of us, because the pay structure was really heavily weighted towards the executives, and we didn't even know that. Whereas our executives were buying, Ferraris and Bugattis and crazy types of things for their homes, and we were like, struggling, really struggling. So when we started Voltaic, it was a lot of us saying, hey, we want to give a platform to people to be able to change their lives. And the more that you meet people who are doing really well and making more money than you ever thought you would be around those type of people before, you found a lot of generosity there. So I began to see that in other
Yeah.
people. Was one way that I think I began to heal it. And then the other was to just try and understand really what money was that if I happen to be in a field that is very lucrative,
Yeah.
sales, specifically solar sales. And if I am just good at my job, if I'm actually working hard and I'm good at my job, I'm going to make a lot of money. And so that was a byproduct of just simply the things that I already valued, which was hard work, integrity, honesty. If I do those things, I'm going to make money. So I have to find a way to be okay with that. I have to
Yeah.
find a way to like realize that this relationship is a byproduct of the things that I already appreciate.
Yeah.
And then to really begin to frame it in terms of tools and what I'm doing with it and how I want to channel that money moving forward. Because I'm like, I drive a Volkswagen Jetta, right? That's the type of car that I'm likely to have for most of my life is is a simple transmuter type of vehicle. I don't buy a lot of flashy things. I'm not that type of person, but I do understand that when I have the money and when I have the ability, I can change people's lives. And that's what I ultimately want to do. And so yeah, it's a healing journey for sure. And it's definitely not done.
Yeah. Is it, uh, is that like your mission right now, is to stack cash for when like the opportunity arises, or like what are the big things that you like to, because we're a for purpose company as well, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to share kind of what we do, but like we partnered with people that are working and fighting human trafficking, right? So we do gross revenue share with these companies that we've partnered with. I'm curious what you're most excited about that you guys are doing, or maybe like your personal initiatives.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of personal causes that I'm kind of more connected with. There's a family that kind of runs an orphanage, but it's sort of just a family that took in a bunch of kids, like 20
Yeah,
something kids in Uganda. And these are just personal connections and things that I have. We've done the whole give power thing in the past as well, providing kind of food and light. And then just recently, my business partner, our CEO, and a few others, we just bought a bunch of gifts for like local kids in the area, and like, helmets for kids that got skateboards that couldn't use them because they were in like the foster care system. And so like foster care is big in LA, homelessness.
yeah,
Those are things that I care about a lot. My church cares about as well. We're kind of connected there. But I think that in general, like what I'm working on right now is transmitting, stacking cash into investments that will ultimately be able to be leveraged and used for different things, right? So whether it be just having, income properties and things like that, that I think ultimately allow you a lot of flexibility in life, whether it be people that need places to stay for periods of time, or even just having that sort of passive asset that allows you to funnel even more of your active income into,
yeah.
additional causes and things like that. So
Sweet. Dude, that's so awesome. That's so awesome. Um, okay, so back to the question that I forgot, that I
yeah.
knew I was gonna forget. So you start to heal this relationship with money. Um,
The question you had was about my business partners and kind of buy-in.
yeah, I can't remember what perspective it was in particular. Was it seeing the good in people, or was
I
it
think I think it was us talking about like, when we were wanting to have a perspective of people first and giving back, like kind of what the buy-in
ah,
was from our leadership team.
yes, yeah. Okay, so unpack that for me, because um it is, when you're building businesses with other people, like you got to come to the table, and everyone's got to agree on certain things. Like, were you guys always just super value driven around people first, around this idea that like we're going to see the good in people, we're going to take less, like, because let's be real, everyone, especially in the solar world, everyone wants to start a dealer because they see what's
Yeah.
happening and they see all their money going to people that they don't feel did any of the work, even though
Yeah.
they built the infrastructure. But like people definitely swing too far to either side of the pendulum in any industry. How did this work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean another great question. I think that in general, the dealer model in our industry, like people are very fast to hop, and
Yeah.
honestly, like if I'm being completely transparent, we got really lucky with the people that we had to start with. We all have very similar values. Um, to like when we left, it wasn't necessarily to even start our own dealership, because back then, this was like 2017, but like we were in a very closed bubble where we didn't even know other companies existed. I could probably list off two companies that I knew existed in the whole country at that point. So we weren't exposed to this dealer model or anything like that. It was just somebody had brought to us that opportunity, and we're like, cool, we can sell and make more money and have better quality of life. That was kind of the original perspective. But as people started coming to us, we're all just naturally gifted leaders, and that's what we wanted to do, is lead others to accomplish their goals. And so the good news is you can do that and have a profitable business.
Yeah.
So the one of the benefits that we had for sure that most people don't is we had a guy named Jake Gerber, who's our CEO. He is the strongest business mind of all four of us, especially back then, had a lot more experience, and he always kept us extremely profitable and very liquid as a company. So we never over leveraged ourselves. I mean, I started getting this I think this year was the very first year that any of us took any kind of salary. And again, it's probably around the twenty to $30,000 mark. So
Yeah.
we're talking very modest salaries after having done this for 5 years. And that was because the idea was to put back into the business, and the business happens to be a people business, right? We're
Yeah.
building sales reps, we're helping customers, we're fulfilling, that channel really well. And so we really were very aligned. We all have different skill sets, and we kind of naturally took on very different places. But the one thing we've never really argued about or never really had debates on was whether we're going to take care of our people.
Mhm.
Sometimes you feel like the people have been really taking advantage of you in certain areas,
Yeah.
and we come to the table and been like, are we giving too much? Are we doing too much? And usually it comes back to saying, you know what, we're going to be who we are, regardless of how the people we have are. And some of those people we've weeded out and have gone their own separate ways, and some of them have been loyal and stuck with us for 4 or 5 years, which is a lifetime in this industry.
Yeah.
And to have that loyalty reciprocated has been all of the affirmation that we needed to say, yeah, we're going to keep doing business the way that we know, because it's going to make us sleep well at night, and we're still going to build an absolute monster, which we've been shown ourselves to be able to do.
Yeah. I want to put this into perspective for people who don't understand the solar industry, because 20 to $30,000, especially in California, that's like the commission on 3 deals. Like, it's not to like degrade that money, but like it's not a lot of money, especially in this industry. So I'm curious on the mindset. So clearly you guys were all really, really dialed on like people first. I want to make sure our people win. Let's build the vehicle for it. Was it kind of like, was everyone kind of aligned of like, hey, we're all sales dudes. Like, you want to make money, go sell.
Yeah.
And we're not like, there's like, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, like, so obviously, I make more than $20,000 or $30,000 a year, and that's because I'm still out there selling. I'm still out there
Yeah.
in homes, closing deals, getting referrals. Building a lot of those channels. I mean, to put this into perspective, again, it was a different time, but we all got in the industry about 2015. Okay, a
Yep.
couple of the guys got in the end of 2014. I got in the beginning of 2015, and at that time, like when we were really humming, we were all doing anywhere between 12 to 20 installs a month. Okay. So like I was typically about a 12 to 15 a month guy. Um, at that time, that equated to about $75,000 a year. Nowadays, that would equate to close to $1 million a year. Okay. So we were really good at what we did. We were high performing sales reps, somewhat out of necessity. And I think that the industry has shifted towards low performance, high income,
Yeah.
as opposed to high performance, low income. It
Yeah.
would have been nice to find a medium,
Yeah.
find
Which
people who
is
are high
cyclical. Like,
performers.
I'm sure it will find its way back down, right? Like, from what I've heard, I've never sold cars, but it seems like the car industry used to be very similar. It was like you don't sell a lot and you make a lot of money, but now you got to sell like 20 cars a month to make 100 grand a year. So
Yeah, the industry is definitely headed back. It's definitely there's a correction in our market as well. That's
yeah.
on the horizon. But yeah, so like that was us. We're like, the good news is starting your own dealer has almost no overhead. At the beginning, it's like, yeah, you get maybe a few hats, a few shirts, but like you have dealer partners and they're taking all the risk, right? But as we started getting offices, we started getting people, started having more gear, like overhead really does stack up, and then you start having to have the tough conversations of, I need you to step up and perform more, because we can't really keep you around if you're doing these kind of small, these small pieces. And part of being
Yeah.
people first doesn't mean that you get walked all over. We had a period of time where we were like just so loyal and just wanting to give everybody the opportunity of a lifetime, as opposed to saying, look, you would honestly be better off at Subway. Like you would probably make more money. You'd probably be happier than working
Yeah.
for us, because you're literally, you've been here for 2.5 months because you love our culture and you've made no money. So like we're not here to, like, we're not just giving out salaries and money like left and right. We're creating an aggressive compensation structure that allows you to go out and work hard and make money that's kind of irresponsible right now. And if you can do
Yeah.
that, great. Go do it at the highest level, and we will pay you $1 million if you can bring in the revenue to do so. And then on the other side, like there's companies that really try and push heavy on salaries for executives and all that. And those companies, as you will see, run themselves into the ground very quickly.
How did you course correct as a leader there? Because I'm so glad you brought this up, because I feel like that does often get associated with being people first, is like kind of being a yes man, or like, getting walked all over, which also, to your point, is not best in service of our people. So it is this counterintuitive cycle. And for you guys, how did you course correct when you found yourself running into that?
Course correction is a good phrase for it, because we definitely had phases like that, where we just didn't want to let anybody go. And again, it didn't really hurt us from a uh, monetary perspective to keep somebody around that wasn't performing. But what we began to find is that it hurt us from a cultural perspective,
Hmm.
and the culture of the team becomes drawn down by low performers and people who are just
Yeah.
not motivated to do the job, who really should be there. And so you have to think, it's kind of like that old uh, like ethics experiment, where it's like, if you're driving the train down the tracks and you have to decide to run over one person or 10 people, like, which one are you going to do? And sometimes you have to sacrifice the one for the many in
Yeah.
this type of business, where you say, if I don't let this person go and I don't, wish them well and move them on, because they're not going to leave on their own, then the other people are all going to underperform and their families are going to hurt, and more people suffer because of a lack of inactivity and a lack of a willingness to make a tough decision. And you just have to be that as a leader. You have to be the one to initiate those kind of conversations and decisions.
Yeah. It's I mean, so often we end up talking about clarity on this show, and especially in the high performance world, but like, this is it's everything, right? Like, it comes back to, what do you actually want? And if what you really want is to be in service of your people and to build this amazing vehicle for them, you have to do and take that fork in the road.
Yeah.
Um, I guess another side of the perspective would be like, as a business owner and as a leader, what metrics are you flexing about? And what I mean by that is, so often, whether it's ego at play or whatever it is, like, number of employees would be a flex. Like,
Sure.
that's a metric that people care way too much about. People care about gross revenue way too much.
Yeah.
People care about contracted revenue way too much. Like, so what numbers are we flexing about?
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Mike. Those are my big pet peeves in the industry, right? Like I said,
Yeah.
I grew a company to be on the Inc. 500 list. I have no idea how they got there. I don't know what it was, whether it was how many people they had recruited, top line revenue, all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, what really matters obviously is bottom line, like what you're really able to bring into the business, profitability. Commission paid to people is a powerful metric as well. And for us, for example, we just started our own installer, and one of the metrics we're looking at very heavily is speed to permission to operate. In our industry, everybody talks about glass on roof because that's when sales reps get paid. And every single dealer is having major issues getting jobs from install to turned on. And the customer experience is destroyed right now. So
Yeah.
our goal right now is to dominate the customer experience by getting at least one referral on every job. And the way you do that is by getting people turned on in a timely manner and having systems in place to make that happen. So those type of metrics we've shifted a lot, because the ones that people advertise, right? Like all of your favorite, and said, I'm not going to call out names, but I could list a lot. The people that you are following in this industry, anyone who's listening to this podcast, most of the time when they're talking about what numbers they're doing and what their growth is and everything, it is about contract value. And they just happen to live in states with larger system sizes. And they, how many people they can bring in. All of those metrics are weak metrics that are
Yeah.
really just for showboating on Instagram in order to bring more people into their company. And it's a marketing Ponzi scheme, is what it is a lot of the time. So you've got to be really hyper focused on the stuff that matters, getting your
Yeah.
people paid, getting the business paid, and actually being able to service customers in a way that creates repeat business, because that type of business is unstoppable.
Yeah. Dude, I couldn't agree more. And I think, like, it's always, as a business owner, it's always challenging. No, that's not the right word, but the decisions aren't always that fun. Right. And I guess it comes back to that ethics conversation. Like, I think we'd both agree that these numbers that we're talking about, like they can be really powerful marketing tools. They can be really powerful recruiting tools. However, I think it then falls on us as the business owner, as the leader, and depending on how large the org is, as the marketer, to then paint that picture effectively, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm gonna flex on all of our client results on Instagram, it's important for me to then paint the picture properly for people when they ask about it,
Yes.
right? Because the testimonial might be about contracted revenue. And if I'm going to flex that and act like it's commissions, then that's not necessarily cool. Or like we need to make sure we're not comparing apples and oranges, like solar commissions versus pest or alarms per deal, very different. Pest or alarms volume compared to solar volume, wildly different,
Yeah.
right? So it's, I think with anything, it always falls down to us that, and it's our moral responsibility to make sure that we're painting that picture effectively so that we, not just for our people, but well, I guess it is our people, like our community, our audience, whatever it might be.
No, I think that's a big thing, right? And if you hear, if you're around me much, you'll hear me talk a lot about identity and integrity, because
Yeah.
integrity is identity at the end of the day. It's who you show up as in every facet of your life, right? From the social media presence, right? Like, for me, one of the things that I've been really kind of known for recently with a lot of my people is that I started a fitness journey about a year and a half ago, and I'm in the gym every single day at 6 a.m. and I'm posting pictures because I'm doing that for accountability for myself. And sometimes it's a flex, right? Sometimes it's like, I'm doing this for XYZ, but like the guy that shows up there has to be the same guy that shows up in business, right? The guy that is
Yeah.
disciplined. If I'm disciplined in my fitness routine, but I'm extremely undisciplined in the way I eat, I'm not going to get results. And
Yeah.
granted, that is an area that I have a lot of improvement to make. But also, if I'm undisciplined in the way I run my business, then it's just I'm portraying a character. And what I've explained to people before, and I don't know where I heard this, and it might not be right, but integrity, the way that I understand it is originally as a Greek theater term. On the opposite side of the hypocrite, you have people who would play characters with multiple masks, and you would have characters that would play with one mask. And that one character throughout the whole show, that's how I think about integrity, is I've got to show up that same way. So when people come and talk to me, when I have interviews with new people, I'm trying to convince them not to take the job most of the time. I'm trying to let them know that, look, this job is not for everybody, but for the right person, it's paradise. It's the best job I've ever had and ever will have. But for the wrong person, this job is not going to be pleasant.
Miserable. Yeah.
Not everybody makes six-figure incomes in this business, but a lot of people make multiple six-figure incomes in this business. And so, finding the balance of being able to say, yes, this is here, this is what this is, but also gotta come with some sense of reality, because if you don't, you're going to get swept up in the tide and you're going to get beat down under the waves.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Um, Before we start to wrap up, I want to bring us back to some of your early work experience, because I know that we kind of jumped from childhood straight into building this massive organization that y'all are building. But one thing that's come up in our conversations through Instagram and as we were kind of preparing to schedule this is your aptitude or like skill set within the communication realm,
Yeah.
and clearly the passion for it. And you attributed a lot of that to some of your early work experience, working with I can't remember what industry you said it was in, but in that working on the floor with a bunch of people struggling with mental challenges and things of that nature. Like, what do you feel like? Talk to me about that experience and how it helped you develop such an impressive skill set with relation to communication.
No, I think that, one, I've always really enjoyed communication, right? I've never been somebody who was really afraid to speak in front of the class, to chase the leadership position where I was on stage. Because I've had a lot of feedback from different people about just kind of a natural giftedness with words and sort of a ability to think on my feet. But absolutely, when I was in that field, it's where I honed my communication skills. So I worked again. It was a warehouse, and it was vocational training, right? So every single person on that floor had an IQ of less than 75. So that means that they all were classified with what's called IDD, or intellectual developmental disabilities. So we had some people who were, decently high functioning autistic. We had people who had Down syndrome, all kinds of people on the spectrum. And so we were responsible to get out production work, which means we would be given boxes and papers, and we had to collate them, put them into bags for pet care industries or packaged toothpastes or whatever that kind of stuff was, right? So a giant warehouse, 250 people, and I had 14 different vocational trainers who worked for me. So an interesting thing about that was when I came in, I was 21, 22 years old, straight out of college, had never really held a real job. And every one of my vocational trainers was between the ages of 40 and 60, and they were all middle-aged African-American women. So I had a cultural barrier, an age barrier, and a work experience barrier that I had to then overcome and lead these women.
Yeah.
And I had to really humble myself, and just I basically went to the tables and I just started doing the work that any one of my clients with disabilities would do. And I was just putting papers in there, and I just watched what happened to begin to develop that. So the idea is, if someone has a training plan, if someone has like their goal is to learn how to do work skills, but also learn how to get along with other people, we would have to have like work plans to help get people there. And so I would talk to the person that was nonverbal, or talk to the person who one day was super happy and the next day was throwing a chair at my head.
Yeah.
So you're taking people in a very vulnerable state and showing them how to do, literally pallet wrapping with a machine and using forklifts. Like, how do you get somebody who struggles to sometimes feed themselves to be able to do a task like that? And it's a matter of taking the concept and simplifying it, right? I don't remember who said it, but they said if you explain something to a truck driver and an engineer, and you talk to them both like an engineer, only one of them is going to understand you. But if you talk to them both like a truck driver, they'll both understand you. So I believe in distilling concepts to their simplest form, which is what makes me really good at sales. Because when I'm in a home, solar is the simplest conversation in the world. Anybody that thinks it's complicated doesn't know how to sell it. But if you can take somebody who has their own beliefs, has their own ideas, and be able to say, cool, I'm going to show you the most basic element, the lowest common denominator of what it's going to take for you to accomplish this. That's what I mean when I say, honing my communication skills, because I learned to talk to every person on a spectrum that you can imagine and still get results out of them, still get them to accomplish their goals and the goals that the people, their project managers and their, social workers had for them. They all had goals, and we were able to be goal oriented and accomplish those things regardless of your ability to function as what we would consider, normal human society.
Yeah.
So I think
Dang.
maybe that was a little insight.
No, that's so good. That's so good. I love the truck driver versus engineer metaphor. I think we always hear like you need to, like, if you can't communicate it such that like a first grader would understand it, you don't really understand it, or like we need to dumb things down. And it's always been interesting to me because I feel like when you do that, people on the sidelines, like the people in the stands, right? Not in the arena, but in the bleachers,
Yeah.
they'll act as if you don't know what you're talking about, but really it's by design, the communication. But that way of breaking it down makes a ton of sense to me. And I think it's really powerful.
It's a simple way of looking at life. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that, whether you're in front of a room of salespeople, whether you're in a home with a customer, or whether you're just dealing with, a family member, communicating is the number one skill set in the whole world, right?
We're all in
And
the people
that
business.
is what gets you where you want to go at the end of the day, and so that being a big portion of it. And the other portion, I think, is just the ability to learn how to actively listen.
Yeah.
Because a good talker is fine, but a good listener is powerful, right? That they're unstoppable. And I took multiple classes in college related around communication, and more focused on the therapy style of communication, right? And so I kind of liken myself to a solar therapist, because when I'm in a home, all I'm trying to do is get you to solve the problem for yourself. So I've got to ask you the right questions, but more importantly, I just need to listen. And I run this whole training. One of my favorite trainings that I run is on active communication skills, where we would actually have in that class, we would have talking and listening mats where you actually would walk on your mat to different parts of listening and different parts of communication. And it really just helps you break down, like, well, what's the difference between saying I think something versus I feel something? You know, what does it mean to say I feel something versus I'm going to take action on something? And those small differences, counselors really understand well that their goal is to get you moving in the right direction, but they're only doing that by simply acknowledging the things you say, repeating them back to you in packages that come out of their mouth and allowing you to correct them, and then maybe asking one or two good questions. Like, counselors barely even ask questions. They mostly just acknowledge, repeat, paraphrase, and get you talking. And if you're talking, you're solving your problems. And if you're talking to me, you're going to go solar, because you're going to find out that there's just no other way for you to go about what you're doing right now. It just makes way too much sense. And you can't talk yourself out of it. I could talk you out of it, but you can't talk yourself out of it. So
good. Bryce, before I ask you the last question, where do you hang out on social? Where can people check more about what you're doing, what Voltaic is doing? Plug away, my friend.
Yeah, so my social media, I'm mostly on Instagram, is at Felkner B, Felknerb. And we can, I'm sure, add it to whatever, posts and stuff that we have here. And then our company is Voltaic, and Voltaic Energy Official is our Instagram handle there as well. So you can kind of see what we're building and watch us grow. We're mostly in California, offices in Texas and Florida. So, we're always, connected well with the community and looking to find the right people to partner with us. But specifically on our construction side is now localized in Southern California until we decide to expand. So, yeah, I love to connect with people in the industry. I've connected with a lot of probably your audience already. But anyone that wants to hang out and challenge one another and push, like, I am 100% about that life. So,
Let's go.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Guys, those will all be linked in the show notes. Get connected, show some love, all that fun stuff. Bryce, last question I have for you. Going all the way back, growing up like Mowgli.
Yeah.
Walking around barefoot for the first decade, then moving to the big city, growing up in Kenya, ended up back in the States, coming to college here, all of your work experience, working in the warehouse, finding your way into door to door, ultimately building this company over the last 5+ years at this point. Wow. 2017 was 5 years ago. That's wild.
Yeah.
But
almost 2023.
This entire window, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact on your life and in your business?
Oof. That is a fantastic question. Distill all of life into one big lesson. I would say that, at the end of the day, who you are matters significantly more than what you do. And if your character and your integrity and the person that you are lines up with where you want to go, then your life will look significantly different than what it is. What I find is that most of the time people fail in one of those two areas. Either they actually don't have the identity and the integrity to follow who they say they want to be, or who they say they want to be really isn't who they want to be. And so if you know who you are and you know where you're going, then the world is going to be open to you. You'll be able to do things that you never dreamed about, and find yourself in places where you never even imagined. Like me, I didn't expect myself to be in sales. This was not my life plan, my life trajectory. But by following and staying consistent to who I am and what I do has put me in the place that I am today. And I could not be more blessed and thankful for the place that I'm at. So yeah, that's just kind of my one quick lesson from life.
Come on. Bryce, thanks for joining me, brother. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Mike. It was an absolute blast. I'll be seeing you around.
100%.